Howdy ho, folks. It's your multiversal medium here with something completely different. Today we're back in the world of Morrowind for another episode of just random nonsense. I think last episode I said I was going to be reading a lot of books today, which should be fun. It should be. Honestly, I should be recording other stuff as opposed to this, but I just want to play Morrowind. Which sounds weird, because I just said we're going to just be reading books. Listen, man, I like this setting. I like doing this. I like recording this. I like just being in this game. Either way, I don't know how long all these books are going to take, so I may as well start up on that right now. So, timestamps down below if you don't want to listen to a bunch of book reading. If this episode does go long enough to the point where I'm able to do other things, I have a few dungeons I'm intending to explore. If not, this is just the entire episode. Nice, chill, funky, and fresh. Let's start with Ancestors of the Dunmer. Ghosts walk among them. The departed spirits of the Dunmeri, and perhaps those of all races, persist after death. The knowledge and power of departed ancestors benefits the bloodlines of Dunmeri houses. The bond between the living family members and immortal ancestors is partly blood, partly ritual, partly, well, volitional. A member brought into the house through marriage binds himself through ritual and oath into the clan, and gains communication and benefits from the clan's ancestors. However, his access to the ancestors is less than his offspring, and he retains some access to the ancestors of his own bloodline. The family shrine. Each residence has a family shrine. I should actually mention this. So, last episode, or what's the episode before that? Both of those episodes, I'm pretty certain I did it in both of those episodes. The Ancestral Tomb we were exploring, with the ghosts, the skeletons, all that nonsense. One, I looked up what that skull was. That's part of the main quest. Fun. We just came across a key MacGuffin for the main quest. Lovely. Also, apparently some of those enemies were uniques only in that dungeon, but what else? On top of that, the name of that ancestral tomb. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was a Dunmeri family name. And we can find Dunmer with that family name out and about in the world. Dang near every single ancestral tomb has living relatives somewhere in the game. So that's something to just consider. You may be robbing like an ancestral tomb of that one quest NPC that you liked a lot. Okay. In poorer homes, it may be no more than a hearth or alcove where family relics are displayed and venerated. In wealthy homes, a room is set aside for the use of the ancestors. This shrine is called the Waiting Door and represents the door to Oblivion. Here, the family members pay their respects to their ancestors through sacrifice and prayer, through oaths sworn upon duties, and through reports on the affairs of the family. In return, the family may receive information, training, and blessing from the family's ancestors. The ancestors are thus the protectors of the home, and especially the precincts of the Waiting Door, the Ghost Fence. It is a family's most solemn duty to make sure their ancestors' remains are interred properly in a city of the dead, such as Necrom. Here the spirits draw comfort upon one another against the chill of the mortal world. However, as a sign of great honor and sacrifice, an ancestor may grant that part of his remains be retained to serve as part of the Ghost Fence, protecting the clan's shrine and family precedents. Is that the right word for it? Is it precedence or precinx? With a CT. You know what? I don't even know if it's a real word. You know what? No, we're looking it up. Is it a real word? We did this a lot in Dread Delusion. I think I did it once or twice in Harvestella. Vocabulary is nice. So yeah, let's look this up. Precedence. Nope, it's CTS. Precinct? Let's see. Yeah, precinct. A district of a city or town as defined for police purposes. Oh, it's precinct. Precinct? Oy vey. Am I that stupid? Precincts? Oy vey. Listen, man. I've never claimed to be smart. I never have. I really haven't. Precincts. Oy vey. I feel so dumb right now. Anyways, let's take it from the top. However, as a sign of great honor and sacrifice, an ancestor may grant that part of his remains be retained to serve as part of a ghost fence protecting the clan's shrine in family precincts. Gosh, how did I miss out? Like, okay, whatever. Moving on. Such an arrangement is often part of the family member's will, that a knucklebone shall be saved out of his remains and incorporated with solemn magic and ceremony into a clan ghost fence. In more exceptional cases, an entire skeleton or even a preserved corpse may be bound into a ghost fence. These remains become a beacon and focus for ancestral spirits. And for the spirit of the remains in particular, the more remains used to make a ghost fence, the more powerful the fence is. And the most powerful mortals in life have the most powerful remains. The great ghost fence created by the tribunal to hold back the blight incorporates the bones of many heroes of the temple and of the house Indoril and Redoran, who dedicated their spirits to the temple and clan as their surrogate families. The ghost fence also contains bones taken from the catacombs of Necrom and the many battlefields of Morrowind. So that's a bit of a world-building main plot stuff that we just glossed over immediately. The Great Ghost Fence, created by the Tribunal to hold back the Blight. This is important to the main plot. We can go to the Great Ghost Fence. That is in the center of the map, right around Red Mountain, which is the center of this entire island we're on. And it was made by the Tribunal, major players in the entire setting for Morrowind. They are the living gods of the Dunmer people. Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vivek. We will interact with them in various ways to various ends. As for their actual stake in everything, we will find such things out. The Blight. There is an illness going around this island that is, I'm fairly certain, right now contained on the island. And there is no cure to it. And it is not nice. We'll be looking into that in the main quest. Either way, that one paragraph was a lot about the world building, setting, and main plot. Out of nowhere in just a random book. Good stuff. The mortal chill. Spirits do not like to visit the mortal world. And they do so only out of duty and obligation. Spirits tell us that the other world is more pleasant, or at least more comfortable for spirits than our real world, which is cold, bitter, and full of pain and loss. Mad spirits. Spirits that are forced to remain in our world against their will may become mad spirits or ghosts. Some spirits are bound to this world because of some terrible circumstances of their death, or because of some powerful emotional bond to a person, place, or thing. These are called hauntings. Some spirits are captured and bound to enchanted items by wizards. If the binding is involuntary, the spirit usually goes mad. A willing spirit may or may not retain its sanity, depending on the strength of the spirit and the wisdom of the enchanter. Some spirits are bound against their wills to protect family shrines. This unpleasant fate is reserved for those who have not served the family faithfully in life. Beautiful and honorable ancestral spirits often aid in the capture and binding of wayward spirits. Oy vey. Like, I've heard of ancestor worship because this is something you will see a lot IRL too in various cultures. Ancestor worship. That being said, if you weren't good to your family, in death, you're bound to protect the shrine of your family against your will and forced into a horrible place and driven mad by doing so. That's effed, yo. That is really effed. These spirits usually go mad and make terrifying guardians. They are ritually prevented from harming mortals of their clans, but that does not necessarily discourage them from mischievous or peevish behavior. They are exceedingly dangerous for intruders. At the same time, if an intruder can penetrate the spirit's madness and play upon the spirit's resentment of his own clan, the angry spirits may be manipulated. Oblivion. The existence of Oblivion is acknowledged by all Tamriel cultures, but there is little agreement on the nature of that other world, other than it is the place where the Aedra and Daedra live, and that communication and travel are possible between this world and Oblivion through magic and ritual. So, going to go a bit more into detail about the world building just because of that paragraph. Oblivion as we know it, besides it just being the sequel to Morrowind, Daedra and Aedra supposedly have their own planes. I don't think we've seen almost any Daedric planes, with the exception of where we go through in Daggerfall. I think you do go through an Daedric plane of Oblivion in Daggerfall, but I may be misremembering. But Daedric planes are places we have seen and gone to in various games. In Oblivion outright, when you're going through Oblivion gates, you're entering the Daedric plane for Mehrunes Dagon. I can't remember exactly what he calls that plane, but it is a pocket of Oblivion that he has full control over, and he molds to his will. I'm not going to say they're omnipotent in those planes, but they're near omnipotent in those planes. Not exactly, but close. And the only reason I say they're not is because there are various moments when the player is in a Daedric realm and they are able to fool or get the upper hand on the Daedric Prince of that realm. So they're not omnipotent and they're not omniscient within that realm. They are very powerful there, though. For a Daedric Prince to actually come all the way to Tamriel, the plane we are currently in while reading this and what most of the games take place in, there usually needs to be some pomp and circumstance. It's not very easy for a Daedric Prince to just show up here and everything be hunky-dory. That's the entire reason the fourth game exists. Mehrunes Dagon is doing various things so he can enter Tamriel. Some would say that's a bad thing. If you know what Mehrunes Dagon represents, it is simply a thing. That being said, there are a few caveats. Specifically, Sheogorath, I think, has showcased multiple times that he will just randomly show up in Tamriel to dick around. Like, regularly he does that. Which makes sense considering he is one of the stronger entities and one of the stronger Daedric princes. I think also with Nocturnal, seeing her directly in what we can assume the closest thing to a Daedra's flesh in Skyrim could be similar to that, and she is one of the stronger Daedric princes, even though all of her quests basically amount to the fact that she's a granny who's constantly getting scammed. I can think of 3 times, I haven't done the Nocturnal quest in Morrowind, but the Nocturnal quest in Oblivion, the Thieves Guild in Oblivion, and the Thieves Guild in Skyrim. Every single time, all those quests, they amount to the fact that Nocturnal is an elderly woman that got scammed. And she didn't realize until later. She's a very powerful Daedric prince, but she's old and she's not really smart, to be honest. That's the funny thing. She's the patron of thieves, and thieves keep stealing from her. It's effing hilarious. Moving on. You do see her in the flesh in Skyrim. That being said, it's also in a place of power for her and worship. So I don't think she has much reach beyond that physically. She has reach just like all other Daedra and Daedra would metaphysically. But I don't think she could actually walk out of the sepulcher that you see her in Skyrim, because it's hard for a Daedric prince to manifest, usually, unless they have various things allowing them to. As far as I'm aware, to be fair, sometimes the rules are made up, and Sheogorath is a showcase of that. I'm pretty certain he just shows up every once in a while to dick around, like I said, and he has been known to throughout the series. It's effing hilarious whenever he's just somewhere and it's like, Sheogorath, what are you doing here? Aw, shucks. Moving on. The Dunmer do not emphasize the distinction between the world and Oblivion, as do the human cultures of Tamriel. They regard our world and the other world as a whole with many paths from one end to the other, rather than 2 separate worlds of different natures with distinct borders. This philosophical viewpoint may account for the greater affinity of elves for magic and its practices. We could go into the origin of elves in the series, as well as the other aspects of Oblivion beyond just the Daedric realms, but I'm just going to leave that rant for a different time if it needs to come up. Foreign views of Dunmeri ancestor worship and spirit magic. The Altmeri and Bosmeri cultures also venerate their ancestors, but only by respecting the orderly and blissful passage of these spirits from this world to the next. That is, Wood Elves and High Elves believe it is cruel and unnatural to encourage the spirits of the dead to linger in our world. Yes, just yes. I can actually go a bit more into detail. Like, this is just me having fun. I'm sorry if I'm ranting and stopping us from just constantly reading this. Aldmeri, the Altmer High Elves. So, they don't want to be alive. And that sounds weird. But from what they know and what they believe and what's kind of showcased, the Altmeri were metaphysical beings that weren't exactly like the Aedra and Daedra, but they were around the same time, just lower rung than what the Aedra and Daedra were. And the creation of Tamriel forced them into being physical-bodied entities, and they hate it. That's why they consider themselves so much better, and they're so pompous to the other races. They know, or at least highly believe, they are a higher existence, forced into a meager existence shell. Of course they wouldn't want to bind their spirits to this realm. This realm is frickin' full of weenies and losers in their mind. The Bosmeri culture, the Wood Elves, they would consider it cruel and unnatural, and they use it as punishment. The Bosmeri, the Wood Elves, have a certain magical contract that affects every single one of them in their homeland. And it's what gave them the form they have. The Bosmeri used to be changelings of sorts. They used to change forms constantly and fluidly. That's why it's considered now for a wood elf to become a werewolf actually very taboo. But they entered a magical contract with the spirit of their homeland, and this basically bound them to the form they're in. But the contract also said, I can't remember exactly what it's called. I can't remember the exact name of this contract, but wood elves should not harvest plants or take plants or hurt plant life. If they needed an herb or whatever that could heal someone that's horribly sick, they need to wait for the herb to fall off its branches before they'd be able to take it. That's why wood elves constantly are more about meat, but it goes beyond that. It actually leans towards cannibalism. Part of this magical contract means they can't let their bodies rot in this forest. So what do you do for internment for a Bosmeri or wood elf that just died? The family eats them. Now those who break, it's the Green Pact. That's what it's called, the Green Pact. P-A-C-T. Those who break the Green Pact are bound to a horrible existence, I believe called like the Ooze, where their spirits are refused the freedom of passing on, and it's a sludge-like afterlife of torture and being tied down in the muck and vileness of the homeland of the Bosmeri. Now, that being said, I think there are caveats to this Green Pact. One of those caveats is I don't think it counts if you're not in the forest of their homeland. So I think Bosmeri and what else should be able to do that kind of stuff in different countries, but I'd have to look up if that's true or not. I vaguely remember that being mentioned somewhere. And like I said, if a plant dies or falls down and is not connected to nature anymore, I guess in a way, they can, I believe, interact with it. Like I said, if they needed herbs or whatever, it would have to fall off the stem naturally before they could take it and use it. That sort of thing. So yes, them being tied and having your spirit linger here is punishment for them. More world building gone, another rant over. I'm sorry, it keeps happening. It's just fun. Even more grotesque and repugnant is the display of the bodily remains of the ancestors in ghost fence and ash pits. The representation of finger bones in a family shrine, for example, is sacrilegious to the Bosmer, who eat their dead, and barbaric to the Altmer, who inter their dead. The human cultures of Tamriel are ignorant and fearful of the Dark Elves and their culture, considering them to be inhumane and evil like Orcs and Argonians, but more sophisticated. I mean, I guess you can consider Argonians evil. I understand the Orcs thing. So before Morrowind, in Elder Scrolls Arena, and mostly in Daggerfall, Orcs aren't the type of race you'd consider them in later entries. In the first game, Orcs are just an enemy type. They are a monster type. In Daggerfall, there is, I want to say, one Orc NPC that you can interact with. And depending on how you interact with that Orc NPC, you change how Orcs are viewed forever. Just forever. And the ramifications of that are why you're able to play Orcs in later entries. So yes, they were just kind of considered evil and almost beast-like, like ogres and trolls. That being said, their origin is unique, and we'll go more into that when we get into Daedric Princes. Argonians can be considered evil, I guess. Argonians and their history and their everything, it kind of scares me too. You just think lizard people in a giant marshland country and that's it. And then you realize they used to have a massive understanding of culture, and they basically are the equivalent of Aztecs or Mayans, in a sense. Central American culture. They have giant pyramids akin to those pyramids you'd see in Central America. And then you realize Argonians, they were never people. Argonians were lifted to the state of people like everyone else by the trees in the marshlands. The marshlands are a higher existence than a majority of the humanoid people we meet. They are a hive mind of trees with a lot of power. And they made the Argonians based on some lizard, probably. That's what we are assuming. We don't have the exact information, but it's assumed Argonians were just a random lizard that were on the trees that they turned into people. So these trees have the ability to make a baseborn species into a person, which is horrifying and setting well beyond how horrifying that is, just one-to-one. And it's something I could go into. Yeah, screw it. This is just me ranting. Let's go into it. So Falmer in Skyrim. If you kill Falmer, the snow elves as you see them in the dwarven ruins in Skyrim, you may notice something if you're soul trapping them. They have the same type of soul as a beast. What I mean is they have white souls. That is the equivalent of rats / skeevers, mammoths, saber-toothed cats. Falmer have the same type of soul, a white soul. This is usually used to determine whether or not it's a person or a beast. Argonians have a black soul. That means they're people, but they started as a beast. These two things say a lot world building wise. One, the fact that Argonians were once a beast and were elevated into people means there's a way to turn base beasts into actual people at a soul level. Their soul is a person now. On the flip side, Falmer, the snow elves, they used to be people. Whatever the dwarves did turned them into the equivalent of animals on a soul level. Those two things are effing horrifying in almost any setting. That's like the equivalent of just seeing your grandma or whatever, and then some evil wizard dude turned your grandma not just into a pig like in the Odyssey or whatever, but spiritually she's a pig now and she goes to whatever afterlife pigs go to. That's what happened to the Falmer. And then that wizard dude went to a cat and turned the cat into like a Necromata waifu. And now the Necromata waifu has their own religion and goes to Necromata waifu heaven, which is right next to your heaven. That's what happened in setting. Okay, enough of that rant. Let's keep reading. Gosh, it's been 30 minutes of one book. Oh no, I need to speed this up. The human populations of Tamriel associate Dunmer ancestor worship and spirit magic with necromancy. In fact, this association of the Dark Elves with necromancy is at least partly responsible for the dark reputation of Dunmer throughout Tamriel. This is generally an ignorant misconception, for necromancy outside the acceptable clan rituals is a most abhorrent abomination in the eyes of the Dunmer. So necromancy in setting is usually pretty obvious. You're taking a carcass, you're using the carcass as a magical medium for some purpose. Usually looked down in society. Dark elves, usually with their kin, their children, and their various future lines, are fine with being necromantically used. But it's something you don't do to anyone else. It's social taboo. And it is social taboo in a majority of cultures, and it's understandable why, like I said. Some cultures consider it way more taboo. Specifically Redguards. The Dark Elves would never think of practicing sorcerous necromancy upon any Dark Elf or upon the remains of any elf. However, Dark Elves consider the humans and Orcish races to be little more than animals. Oh yeah, we got that elf supremacy going on. There is no injunction against necromancy upon such remains or on the remains of any animal, bird, or insect. So yeah, let's just say this is a magical world that you and I live in. If necromancy was a form of magic, I think most people would try to argue like, I'm not doing necromancy on people. People are people. I'm doing necromancy on this lizard as part of my magical thesis. But then you start to get into racial superiority and stuff. And then suddenly it's not, I'm not doing necromancy on people. I'm doing necromancy on a human. They're not people. That's how Dark Elves look at that. Oy vey. Imperial policy officially recognizes the practices of Dunmer ancestor veneration and spirit magic as a religion, and protects their freedom to pursue such practices, so long as they do not threaten the security of the Empire. Privately, most Imperial officials and traders believe Dark Elf ancestor worship and displays of remains are barbaric or even necromantic. Telvanni necromancy. The Telvanni are adept masters of necromancy. They do not, however, practice necromancy upon the remains of Dark Elves. Sane Telvanni regard such practices with loathing and righteous anger. I love how they had to say sane Telvanni. So Telvanni is one of the 3 noble houses we have a chance to join in. They are the magic noble house. They are known for being eccentric. And by eccentric, I mean bat crap insane mages. They are full evil wizard tower setup. They don't think they're evil. But gosh, do they not care about what the heck they're doing and the ramifications of it if they can pursue more magic, okay? They're kind of a romp. They do practice necromancy upon the remains of animals and upon the remains of humans, orcs, and Argonians, who are technically no more than animals in Morrowind. Publisher's note. This book was written by an unknown scholar as a guide for foreign visitors to Morrowind shortly after the armistice was signed. Many of these practices have since fallen into disfavor. The most obvious changes are those regarding the practice of necromancy and the Great Ghost Fence. Dunmer today regard necromancy upon any of the accepted races as an abomination. The Ghost Fence has forced many changes in the practice of ancestor worship, which the vast majority of ancestors remains going to strengthen the Great Ghost Fence around the mountain of Dagoth. There are very few clan ghost fences in Morrowind. The temple discourages such practices among the houses as selfish. The upkeep of family tombs and private waiting rooms has also fallen into disfavor, as very few remains have been buried in these tombs and shrines since the armistice. In recent years, most Dunmer venerate a small portion of their ancestors' remains kept at a local temple. So, as that publisher's note just mentioned, the central ghost fence, let's actually go to the world map real quick. So let's just see. So this is Death Mountain right here. Death Mountain, Red Mountain. It's a red mountain. And the ghost fence is surrounding it to hold off the blight. They've been needing all the bodies of every single dark elf that's died since a very recent treaty to go into this fence to keep out the blight. Things are getting worse. That's just the long and short of it. Things are getting worse in Vardenfell. That's effing... I love that publisher's note right there. I do. Anyways. The Homilies of blessed Almalexia. Sothasil and the Scribes. Young Sothasil, while playing in the egg mines, saw a number of scribes. Oh wait, Sothasil and the Scribes. I was a fool. saw a number of scribs in the deep shaft, and he began to cast stones upon them, snickering as they skittered and scattered, until one of the scribs, lifting its head up in agony, cried out to Sothasil, "Please, please have mercy, little boy. For what is sport to you is suffering and death to us." And so Sothasil discovered that the idle amusements of one may be the solemn tortures of another. Lord Vivek and the contentious beasts, a Shulk and a Kagudi, were strutting back and forth. I don't know if we're going to see a Shulk at any point. We will see Kagudi, but a Shulk is like a giant beetle. Just a giant beetle in this like setting. A Shulk and a Kagudi were strutting back and forth in a Foyada. Remember I talked about that last episode? A Foyada is a giant lava trail from Red Mountain all the way to the sea, and after the lava clears out, it's kind of just a natural pathway all the way from Red Mountain to the sea, casting aspirations of one another's looks. "You are the ugliest creature alive," the Shulk told the Kagudi. "No, you are the ugliest creature alive," the Kagudi told the Shulk. For each thought themselves most handsome and the other most ugly. Then Lord Vivek chanced by and settled their dispute. "No, you both are the ugliest creatures alive, and I will not have my pleasant sojourn spoiled by your unseemly squabbling." So he dealt them both mighty blows, shattering their skulls and silencing their argument, and went merrily upon his way. And thus Lord Vivek proved that ugliness is as much in one's manner as in one's appearance. The boiled Kagudi. It is said that if a Kagudi steps into a boiling pool, he will leap out immediately to avoid harm. But if the Kagudi is standing in a pool and a wizard slowly raises the temperature, measure by measure, to boiling, the Kagudi will calmly stand in place until he is boiled. Thus we see that we must be alert not only to the obvious danger, but also to the subtle degrees by which change may result in danger. The dubious healer. Once upon a time, a Telvanni issued forth from his tower and proclaimed to all the world that he was a mighty and learned healer, master of all alchemy and potions, and able to cure all diseases. Lord Vivek looked upon this wizard and listened to his boasting, then asked him, "How can you pretend to prescribe for others the cure to all diseases, when you are unable to cure yourself of your own manifest arrogance and foolishness?" The Gwar and the mud crabs. The Gwar were so tormented by the other creatures, they did not know where to go. As soon as they saw a single beast approach them, off they dashed in terror. One day they saw a pack of Nixhounds ranging about, and in a desperate panic all the Gwar scuttled off towards the sea, determined to drown themselves rather than live in such a continual state of fear. But just as they got near the shoreline, a colony of mud crabs, frightened in their turn by the approach of the Gwar, scuttled off and threw themselves into the water. "Truly," said one of the Gwar, "things are not so bad as they seem, for there is always someone worse off than you." The wounded Netch. A wounded Netch lay himself down in a quiet corner of its feeding ground. His healthy companions came in great numbers to inquire about his health, yet each one helped himself to a share of the fodder which had been placed there for his use. So that poor Netch died, not from his wounds, but from the greed and carelessness of the erstwhile friends. And so it is clear that thoughtless companions may bring more harm than help. Yeah, don't fear a tiger-like enemy, fear a pig-like teammate. Yep. Anyways, as you can kind of see, this book is filled with a bunch of small stories based on the tribunal, Almalexia, Vivek, and Sothasil, to teach various morals and the like to better oneself as they move forward. I mentioned while reading the last book, the tribunal, the three living gods of the Dunmer people, are just that, three living gods. And we'll go more into them, but They've been a part of Dark Elf culture since they were Dark Elves. There haven't been Dark Elves without the Tribunal. They were something else beforehand. So yeah, it's something to look into later. The Annotated Anuad. The Anuad paraphrased. The first ones were brothers, Anu and Padome. They came into the void, and time began. As Anu and Padome wandered the void, the interplay of light and darkness created Nur. Both Anu and Padome were amazed and delighted with her appearance, but she loved Anu, and Padome retreated from them in bitterness. So this is a creation myth that we're reading, we can already tell. A creation myth of everything, because I think this is low-key tied to every race. Nur became pregnant, but before she gave birth, Padome returned, professing his love for Nur. She told him that she loved only Anu, and Padome beat her in rage. Anu returned, fought Padome, and cast him outside time. Nur gave birth to creation, but died from her injuries soon after. Anu, grieving, hid himself in the sun and slept. Meanwhile, life sprang up on the 12 worlds of creation and flourished. After many ages, Padome was able to return to time. He saw creation and hated it. He swung his sword, shattering the 12 worlds in their alignment. Anu awoke and fought Padome again. The long and furious battle ended with Anu the victor. He cast aside the body of his brother, who he believed was dead, and attempted to save creation by forming the remains of the 12 worlds into one, Nirn, the world of Tamriel. So that's the world we're currently in. I know I mentioned Oblivion, all those planes or whatever, a couple books back. Tamriel, Nirn, that's the plane of existence we play in usually. As he was doing so, Padome struck him through the chest with one last blow. Anu grappled with his brother and pulled them both outside of time forever. The blood of Padome became the Daedra. The blood of Anu became the stars. The mingled blood of both became the Aedra, hence their capacity for good and evil, and their greater affinity for earthly affairs than the Daedra, who have no connection to creation. On the world of Nirn, all was chaos. The only survivors of the 12 worlds of creation were the El-No-Fe and the Hist. So, I was mentioning just 2 books ago how the High Elves consider themselves a higher plane, a higher existence compared to the other races. The High Elves were once El-No-Fe. Now, on the flip side, I mentioned that Argonians were raised by trees into something. The Hist is the trees that made the Argonians. The El-No-Fe are the ancestors of Mare and Men. The Hist are the trees of Argonia. Nirn originally was all land, with interspersed seas but no oceans. A large fragment of the El-No-Fe world landed on Nirn, relatively intact, and the El-No-Fe living there were the ancestors of the Mare. These El-No-Fe fortified their borders from the chaos outside, hid their pocket of calm, and attempted to live on as before. Other El-No-Fe arrived on Nirn, scattered amid the confused jumble of the shattered worlds, wandering and finding each other over the years. Eventually, the wandering El-No-Fe found the hidden land of old El-No-Fe, and were amazed and joyful to find their kin living amid the splendor of ages past. The wandering El-No-Fe expected to be welcomed into the peaceful realm, but the old El-No-Fe looked on them as degenerates, fallen from their former glory. For whatever reason, war broke out. and rage across the whole of Nirn. The old Elnofe retained their ancient power and knowledge, but the Wanderers were more numerous and toughened by their long struggle on Nirn. This war reshaped the face of Nirn, sinking much of the land beneath new oceans and leaving the land as we know them. Tamriel, Akavir, Atmora, and Yakunda. The old Elnofe realm, although ruined, became Tamriel. The remnants of the Wanderers were left divided on the other 3 continents. Over many years, the Elnofe of Tamriel became the Mare, Elves, the Dwemer, the Deep Ones, sometimes called Dwarfs, the Chimer, the Changed Ones, who later became the Dunmer. The Dunmer, the Dark or Cursed Ones, the Dark Elves. The Bosmer, the Green or Forest Ones, the Wood Elves. The Altmer, the Elder or High Ones, the High Elves. On the other continents, the wandering Elnofe became the Men, the Nords of Atmora, the Red Guards of Yakunda, and the Tiasi of Akavir. We are never going to see the Siasi, or however you pronounce that, of Akavir. We still haven't properly been to Akavir yet. There's a lot of lore stuff about Akavir. We have not been there yet. The Hist were bystanders in the Elnofe War, but most of their realm was destroyed as the war passed over it. A small corner of it survived to become Black Marsh in Tamriel, but most of their realm was sunk beneath the sea. That is horrifying. Oh my effing gosh, that is horrifying. The Hist scares me, man. With good reason. Eventually, men returned to Tamriel. The Nords were the first, colonizing the northern coast of Tamriel before recorded history, led by the legendary Ysgramor. The 13th of his line, King Harald, was the first to appear in written history, and so the mythic era ended. So, although this is a creation myth, other races have different myths, like explaining their creation and how they ended up in Tamriel. The Red Guards seem to actually have been from a different timeline. You could say Yakuta or whatever was a continent that maybe even fell during that huge battle between the 2 progenitors. That being said, I think a majority of men in this series now, men-based races, we're talking Red Guards, Imperials, Nords, that sort of thing, tend to have ties. Maybe this was retconned after this game, but consider themselves to not exactly be related to elves as a whole, with the exception of Bretons, and Bretons do have distinct ties to elves. That's why they're so good at magic for a human race. Now, part of the reason, the fact that a majority of the Hist went into the sea with this creation myth kind of making me afraid, there are other races, other people races. First and foremost, there's the Mormer, Maomer, Mormer. They are known as the Sea Elves. They are blue in skin tone, and they tend to just be pirates, usually off the sea. They look fairly similar, I believe, to Altmer, but that may just be some of the devs being lazy when it comes to ESO, but we have seen them. Beyond that, we also have the Sload. The Sload are horrifying. So, as Khajiit are to cats for being a person, a Sload is to a sea slug to being a person. They are usually not very nice. We have interacted with them in 2 games. One, I believe, is Red Guard, the Elder Scrolls spin-off Tomb Raider clone. Yes, there is a Tomb Raider clone in the series called Red Guard. I believe you interact with one Sload in that game, as well as a dragon. Yeah, dragons have been around since before Skyrim, guys. They've been here and there. I think there's one in Daggerfall as well. And then we've also interacted with them in ESO. And I would not be super surprised if the Hist had their hand in making the Sload. I would not. I really, really wouldn't. Because part of the reason the Hist made the Argonians was to learn about the world. Okay. We got 2 more books. The Anticipations. This is going to be about lore building and world building for the Tribunal. The Anticipations. The Daedra are powerful ancestor spirits, similar in form and substance to the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, but weaker in power and more arbitrary and removed from the affairs of mortals. Oh gosh, they've had so much time to set up this friggin' stuff. In old times, the Chimer worshipped the Daedra as gods, but they did not deserve this veneration, for the Daedra harmed their worshippers as often as helped them. The advent of the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, changed this unhappy state by the apotheosis of the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, became the protectors and high ancestor spirits of the Dunmer, and bade the Daedra to give proper veneration and obedience. The 3 good Daedra, Boethia, Azura, and Mephala, recognized the divinity of the triune ancestors, blessed be their holy names. The rebel Daedra, Molech Bal, Malakath, Sheogorath, and Mehrunes Dagon refused to swear fealty to the Tribunal, blessed be their holy names, and their worshippers were cast out. I want to go on a rant so effing bad, but we'll go over this later, man. This is related to this main plot and the world setting and everything. These rebel Daedra thus became the 4 corners of the House of Troubles, and they continue to plague our tranquility and tempt the unwary into heresy and dark worship. The priests of the temple remain ever vigilant for signs of the adversary's return, sometimes aided by the loyal 3 good Daedra, who are familiar with the wiles of the rebellious kin. The good Daedra are known to the temple as the Anticipations, since they are the early ancestral anticipations of the loving patronage of the Tribunal. What? They didn't say it. They didn't do the thing. Why didn't they say, blessed be their holy names? Come on, man. If you're gonna set up a freaking thing like that, you gotta follow through. The Anticipations are the Daedra lords, Boethia, Mephala, and Azura. Boethia is the anticipation of Almalexia, from male to her female. Boethia was the ancestor who illuminated the Elves long ago, before the Mythic era. He told them the truth of Lorkhan's test. We'll get into that. And defeated Oriel's champion, Trinimac. We'll get into that. Boethia ate Trinimac and voided him. We'll get into that. The followers of Boethia and Trinimac rubbed the soil of Trinimac upon themselves and changed their skins. Just oy vey. We'll get into all of that. I should also note something. This is not related to stuff we'll get into, but Boethia being male to Almalexia's female. As we can tell from this, Almalexia of the Tribunal is a female. Boethia, though, isn't male. Daedric princes as we know them, every single Daedric prince, and arguably Aedra as well probably, do not have a set form. They don't have a set form whatsoever. They can change their form seemingly willy-nilly as they want. This leads to uniqueness, and I guess you can consider it a way of easily retconning designs as time moves on. If you've played Skyrim, you may have been to the Shrine of Boethia and noticed that the Shrine of Boethia is female by that time. But if you play Oblivion, you may notice that the Shrine of Boethia is male. And in Morrowind, and probably interacting with Boethia in Daggerfall, which interacting with the Daedric princes in Daggerfall, I heard, is insufferable. It's so hard to do. It's so insufferable. The stars need to align both figuratively and literally in game. So Boethia in Daggerfall is probably male as well, but Daedric princes can change not just their form, but their gender as they wish. They are very fluid in how they present themselves. So Boethia, Skyrim, and possibly Onward is female. That's it. Mephala is the anticipation of Vivek. I'm not surprised by that one. That would make sense. That, if you know both of them, that makes sense. But manifold and androgynous. I'll get into that. I will really get into that because I love that bit, actually. I super love that. Mephala taught the Chimer to evade their enemies or kill them with secret murder. The Chimer were few in these days and threatened on all sides. Mephala taught the Chimer to build houses. Later, Mephala created the Morag Tong. We'll get into the Morag Tong too. We will deal with that. I'm looking forward to it. That's a lot of fun right there. Azura is the anticipation of Sothasil, but female to his male. Azura was the ancestor who taught the Chimer how to be different from the Altmer. Her teachings are sometimes attributed to Boethia. In the stories, Azura is often encountered more as a communal progenitor of the race as a whole, rather than an individual ancestor. She is associated with dusk and dawn, and is sometimes called the Mother Soul. Azura's star, also called the Twilight Star, appears briefly at dawn and dusk low on the horizon, below the constellation of the Steed. Azura is associated with mystery and magic, fate, and prophecy. We'll get into that. There's a lot in that book that we will get into later, and gosh, do I want to rant about it because it's a lot of fun. I love world building like this. The Book of Dawn and Dusk. The Book of Dawn and Dusk is a collection of sayings and aphorisms attributed variously to the tribunals and to their saints and servants. Many of these sayings have become common cliches of everyday life in Morrowind. The following selection of slogans will illustrate many of the simplest notions of the tribunal faithful. Speak none but good of the gods. We can have no opinions about truth. Rumors flow from the house of troubles. Count only the happy hours. No child has a sinner's heart. Let faith be your only law. Fear of the fool is the beginning of wisdom. Almsivi in every hour. So, as you're kind of seeing, all these sayings are just general words of wisdom to live by. Almsivi we haven't exactly gone over yet, so that may seem odd. Almsivi is a shortening of the tribunal. Almalexia as Alm, Sothasil as C, and Vivek as V. Almsivi, we will see that a lot, means the tribunal. Those three living gods that we just talked about in the last book, and just here and there in the other books. Walk always in the presence of your lords. Comfort is given, justice is taken. Learn by serving. From the heart, the light. From the head, the law. Blessed Almsivi, mercy, mastery, mystery. This goes up how each of them kind of have their own domain that they are known for. Almalexia is the mother goddess of the Dunmer. She, as a mother goddess, is merciful. Sothasil, with his mastery of Dwemer technology in his clockwork kingdom, is mastery. Vivek, with their countless poetic and warrior tendencies, their rhetoric of countering people's thoughts and understanding deeper truths while never exactly alluding or telling such things, is mystery. Forge a keen faith in the crucible of suffering. Engrave upon the eye the image of injustice. Death does not diminish, the ghost gilds with glory. Faith conquers all. Let us yield to faith. Better to suffer a wrong than to do one. The heavens are in their glory. Applaud. Folly secures its power to harm. Though forbidden to some, not to you. Oh, how rarely wisdom rules our hearts. Blessed are we who serve Almsivi. Free mouths sing, mercy, mastery, mystery. Gather no seed in the fields of hell. The thrice sealed house. Yeah, the thrice sealed house, huh? That's okay. Moving on. Withstands the storm. The thrice sealed house withstands the storm. Okay, you know what? Yeah, let's just look at that one face value and not look any deeper, because I could look deeper. By breath and blood, protect us all. Can ghosts or justice change with time? Consider your end, mortal. Accept grace without limits. Enter the rhapsody of the god poet. So, god poet. That is referencing Vivek. Vivek, with their kind of dual domain and aspects of themselves, is a warrior poet. They're known for good rhetoric and fighting people both mentally and physically. They're strong of the mind and of the body. Kneel before the teacher's chair. 3 hands, 3 hearts, 3 eyes. Keep no secret from your judge's scale. Forge darkness into light. Refuse neither brother nor ghost. Blessed Almsivi, through birth, life, ghost. From glowing ashes the poet's wrath shall shine. If Vivek is for us, who can stand against us? Fate monstrous and empty, the whirling wheel of evil. How black my heart roasting fiercely. Okay. I believe that's all the books, and it's been an episode because I rambled too much. I'm sorry, guys. I enjoyed it. Hopefully some of you guys liked going into the world building and other aspects that we just went over. I can't believe all I did was read and talk, and oh gosh, oh no. I guess that's 7 done though. Okay. It was fun. I got a lot of like smiles and giggles, and now I'll go work on other recordings I should be doing instead of this. I'll talk to you all in another episode of something else on my channel, or maybe another episode of Morrowind. But until then, ciao. Howdy folks. If you liked what you saw, maybe consider another series of mine, like this one, or maybe just check out my channel. And if you enjoyed that video, I'd really appreciate if you took the time to like and comment down below. It helps me get more videos into your hands. Thanks in advance.